Welcome to AI and Design, where we explore how artificial intelligence is reshaping the world of design. I'm Nick Martellero.
And I'm Dan Saffer, and we're faculty at Carnegie Mellon's Human-Computer Interaction Institute. Each week, we break down the latest AI developments, dive deep into topics that matter to designers, and talk with fascinating guests who are right at the intersection of these fields.
Whether you're a designer working with AI or an AI practitioner interested in design, we're glad you're here.
And I know you're all going to be shocked at this, but on today's episode, we're going to be discussing the launch of Anthropic's Claude Design.
And I spent last week in Barcelona attending HCI's biggest conference, and I'll tell you what I saw. I've also got some mini interviews with researchers working on the cutting edge of AI and design research.
I'm really looking forward to hearing the report. I've deliberately kept away from all the Kai news so I could hear it right from you. But first, we have to talk about the elephant in the coal mine here. So I'm out last Friday, living my best life. All of a sudden, my phone starts blowing up. Text, Slack, Signal, Discord, messages. Have you seen it? Have you seen it? Have you tried it? It launched. And of course, I'm talking about Claude Design. This entire weekend on LinkedIn was insufferable. My feed was nothing but thought pieces about Claude Design. People trying it, people liking it, people hating it, people weighing pros and cons, lots of hand wringing. Nick, have you tried it?
Yeah, so I tried it, and I actually did a couple of things with it. I did one task where I wanted to create like a new lab website. I mean, one of the things that I saw in the demo, which I really liked, was the ability to generate options. So you can say something like, give me 6 layout options for this. The other thing that I tried was doing it in sort of sketchy mode, wireframe mode, as opposed to high fidelity mode. You know, as someone who actually still, even today, likes to work mostly by hand, I appreciate the sort of sketchy way of looking at things. I think that working in those lower fidelity media are useful because you're thinking more about content layout, information architecture, as opposed to pure, say, aesthetics. And yeah, honestly, it did a pretty good job. Now, I asked for something that also could be done very well with like a WordPress template, or today, you know, like a GitHub Jekyll template for a lab website. But I really liked the fact that I could ask for options and it generated them. The other thing that I liked a lot, and this one I was like, this was super cool, was the tweak mode. So the tweak settings where you could say, hey, I want to tweak color. For example, I had it so I could tweak primary colors, fonts, font sizing, spacing of, say, carousel or card interfaces. And it was really nice to be able to like just click those things and then see the differences and see how they would look in the full wireframe without having to, say, regenerate something, especially when oftentimes that's what I found was really challenging working with, say, Claude Code and generating a prototype of something and being like, oh, wait, but I want to just adjust this a little bit. Like having the tweak mode was really, really nice. The other thing that I tried was a presentation because I just came back from Kai. I actually I had to give a talk while I was there. So I made my presentation myself. I did it in Keynote like I've always done, but I said, hey, you know, how well would it do? And I gave it the outline for my slides and then said, hey, I like to have black slides with sans serif font, something clear and readable. And then I drew a sketch. This is the thing that I loved being able to do, was drawing the sketch and say, here's kind of how I like to lay my slides out. Little title at the top, an assertion on one side, and then a square, like put a figure or an image over here. And I said, you know, look at that. And it was a just really garbage sketch, but one can imagine, you know, sort of what I did. And it did that. Now, arguably, that's a pretty standard slide layout, but I didn't describe it. I didn't describe what that looked like. I did just say, here's the sketch. That was pretty good. I will say everything I got looked good, and it looked good in the way that a lot of things look good today. Like, and it wasn't, I don't know. It almost felt, it felt like it was missing something, but it wasn't totally bad. Like there's something that I'm missing there, but I'm not totally sure what it is. Dan, have you tried it?
I have tried it, and yeah, I was impressed by it. I definitely felt like it was the most robust of these kind of tools that we've tried recently. And I went a little deeper with it. My daughter had a pretty good startup idea and fairly complex. I'm not going to give it away, but it's got calendaring, it's got some social aspects, it's got some validation, it's got some search, and I plugged in a pretty decent sized prompt. And because it's summertime theme, again, not giving anything away, I mean, who knows if this will ever go anywhere, but it's her idea, so not mine. But I was like, what could I plug into this thing and try? And let it run. And the first outcome was pretty good. Like the style was okay and the general layout seemed okay. Yeah, and then I did a couple tweaks using the tweak mode, just like you said. That was awesome. And then I was like, well, it's kind of missing this piece. This doesn't make that much sense. And as I start to kind of push into it, there was a lot of things that were like, well, this is there because I thought it should be there. And in some cases, that idea was great. Like it had thought of a couple add ons that I hadn't. And I'm like, well, that's a very clever idea. I'll keep that for sure. But other times it was like, here's a notification. I'm like, okay, well, what is it? What am I being notified by? And it was a completely dead icon for notifications, and it's like, well, what are we notifying here? I don't know. So there was a lot of kind of dead ends like that, and because it was in a context that I actually know, and I'm like, well, it didn't reflect what the end user group cared about the absolute most. And so I had to add that in as another prompt and put that in there. And I'm like, well, this is where having some kind of contextual knowledge through user research or through lived experience really mattered, because I was quickly able to say, well, this is just not as helpful as it could be. And so really having that and digging into that was really interesting, and it added it great, but I had to know that it wasn't there. I knew what it didn't know, and so that was helpful. But if I didn't know what I didn't know, then I couldn't have helped shaped it.
Yeah, I should say I think that for me, the reason I did the slide design was because actually just a week before my talk, I was like, well, I don't know, can I get Claude to make my PowerPoint slides for me? Like, hey, I got this outline and stuff like that, and I tried it, and it creates a PowerPoint. Oh, and it was bad. Like it was a black
Right.
background with white text, but like it couldn't even get the positioning of the titles consistent, which I was like, I don't even understand how you do that. Like it's a template, like PowerPoint, like it should be every slide. Like, what? This was a huge improvement. I should say, if you're out there and you've tried, for example, like Claude Cowork to create, say, PDF or PowerPoint type assets before and have been really underwhelmed, this was a huge improvement. Like this feels in some ways like the step change in regards to like the same way we had with the coding agents.
Right.
This feels like the step change moment.
Yeah, I mean, regular Claude can't format a Word document with any consistency, much less a slide deck. And yeah, this does feel like a big jump. I'm giving a talk on Wednesday, and so I'm sad that I'm like, "Oh, maybe I should try and put it in and see how it goes," because Claude helped me do the outline of the talk. So I'm like, well, can I just port that over? Maybe I'll give that a try. I mean, one of the many threads of discourse around this was like, is this the end of Figma? And I'm not sold on that yet. I do think that Figma has a lot of brand loyalty. It's got deployment and thousands of workflows. It's got that SaaS buy-in already. It's beloved by the design community. So I'm not ready to throw in the Figma towel yet, but on the flip side, I heard another statistic that was pretty surprising to me, and maybe surprising to you, that only a third of Figma's users classify themselves as designers. The other two-thirds, not designers, a third of which are kind of other, which I'm guessing is like marketing and product management, and another third are developers. And for particularly the PMs and especially the developers who are probably already in Claude and hardcore Claude users, I'm guessing that will be a big defection from their to this tool.
Yeah, I was also really surprised to see that. I guess I had thought it was higher, but maybe when I thought about it a little bit more, it makes sense because in many ways Figma is the shared canvas for a lot of the design work, but a lot of the product work, right? It's like, you have Figma, you've also got FigJam, and so this is sort of that shared visual board in which you're working and we're all team members.
And they've got the stuff like export as PowerPoint.
So the send to Canva was interesting to me because they have had a lot of reasonable partnership with Figma, right? Getting MCP working. They've talked about that in other stories. The fact that there isn't a send to Figma button here, I don't know what that means. I don't know if I want to read too much into it, but it's interesting that they've decided to partner specifically with Canva. I wonder if the play here, maybe they're positioning Claude Design as like Canva. Like Canva users are often not professional designers, though they can use it. Their professional designers are in Figma, but everyone else, my students who need to just make a poster, right? They're in Canva because they're getting a good template with a little bit more design sense than like a PowerPoint template. And they're like, yeah, this works great. So it's interesting that that's where they position themselves on that export. You can upload a Fig file.
Okay.
So you can
So you
upload a Fig.
can, yeah, right. I mean, the other thing we didn't talk about is when you first boot this thing up and you're like, hey, I'm going to make something. It's like, okay, where's your design system? You got a design system? I'll take that.
Yeah.
And that's super nice. Like, okay, well, yeah, sure, take it. This is great because that's been one of the tripping points for a while now is getting those things synced up. So this thing does it like super easy. That's a big bonus.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I saw as I was using it too was the fact that even if you don't have a design system, it starts to create one for you, and
Right.
then that's what's allowing the tweaking and the editing, which is really nice. But it also got me thinking as I was using it, it does everything effectively in code. Like it's always writing code to do stuff, which makes sense. That's how you have to like render it. But it's always like, oh, I got to write, code which I found interesting, and I kind of have been wondering, is that limiting? Does that limit us?
It's definitely token limiting. I saw a lot of people over the weekend being like, well, there goes my token limit for like 2 pages of this thing. So it is token intensive. Now, will we start seeing token maxing amongst designers now? Maybe. I don't know. Thinking about this, I mean, the other thing I was thinking about is so Figma is a 2,000 person company. Anthropic is a 2,500 person company. Figma, that 2,000 person company is Figma is pretty much all they do. I mean, they have, Figma Make and, and FigJam and some other little things. But Anthropic, how many people do you think that they put on this out of the 2,500? Maybe 20, maybe. So it's like, ooh, boy, that's some tough math there in the SaaS apocalypse realm.
That's a pretty interesting point. I hadn't really considered that. The fact that they are able to kind of recreate these tools. And the thing here too is they're able to create them quickly, right? The level of capability. I mean, we said that when we talked about Google Stitch, right? I was so impressed at what likely a similarly small team at Google was able to produce, already kind of knowing the answer. I mean, that's the thing, right? Figma has already gotten an answer in regards to like, this is what a good design tool looks like for many, many people. And so, would I say that these are wildly different? Are they taking a completely different path? Maybe not. But at the same time, yeah, it is being done with much fewer people. They're being done on much more rapid timelines. And the fact that they're integrated, I mean, I'll say myself, I am using Claude a lot more for my work. Like the way in which they have just built co-work and built the integrations, I'm like, yep, it's starting to work, and I'm starting to kind of get into a rhythm of like understanding how to use it. And so the more that these are actually, it's even one of these things now when I have a tool that I can't connect, I'm starting to almost get like frustrated. Like, why can't I just make these things talk to each other? Like, I just want Claude to be able to talk to this tool and like do some stuff. Maybe not everything, but just some stuff.
And I'll say the other thing about this is that Anthropic owns the models. They could build this with their latest and greatest model, and then power it with the next greatest model, which is what Opus 4.7. I'm really bad about remembering all these names. 4.7. Meanwhile, you look at Figma Make and it's back at the 4.5. So they're like Figma Make powered by Anthropic using an older model. So even if you are using Figma Make, you're not getting as good of results because you're on an older model, and they would have to buy a separate Claude version in order to build something like Claude Design. So, like, I don't know, is Figma funding its own demise here?
I don't know. I mean, I would say if there are folks out there who work at Figma and you're interested in talking to us, I mean, it'd be really interesting to hear, from your perspective. If you can talk about it, I understand this is probably quite sensitive, all kinds of stuff, but I mean, it would
Oh
be
my God.
interesting to,
Come on our show, get fired.
yeah.
It'll be awesome. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I guess not. I'm sorry. Forgive me, folks. I'm an academic. We get to talk about whatever we do for the most part all the time. Um, yeah, I'm not sure.
But yeah, well, I think what we should probably wrap this up with is that we are now almost 2 months exactly out from the big Figma conference, Config, and boy, the heat is on for that to see what is going to happen with things like Figma Make. Figma Make, they just announced last year at Config, and that was almost exactly a year ago. And then everyone kind of got it in July of last year, if I'm getting the timeline right. So, boy, have things changed in less than a year's time. So, crazy times, crazy times.
This is
I
why
will
we have
be
a
at
weekly show.
This is why we have a weekly show. I will be at Config and be doing a report there. So I'm looking forward to meeting folks and interviewing them for the pod there. And speaking of which, Nick, you just got back from a big conference. So I'm glad you're back and I want to hear about what you saw.
Yeah, so I was in Barcelona at the uh, ACM conference on human factors in computing, or CHI. It's our biggest HCI conference of the year. This year was basically maxed out at, I think, 5,800 people. Like that, which is kind of wild for HCI. We're not like the AI conferences that are today, which are, like now I think they're even up at like tens of thousands of people. HCI is still not that big, and this was massive. And yes, there's a ton of stuff. First off, AI was everywhere. I think they had, I don't know how many sessions of AI, but you couldn't go to every room. It was literally impossible. So this conference, just to give people a sense, it's in a big convention center, and there are something like 15 to 20 parallel sessions going on. So there's like 15 talks going on at any one time. And then you try to like pick one, and then there's 7 talks within a session within about an hour and a half. So everyone gets like 10 minutes. So I was there, and yeah, there's a ton of AI stuff. And I was trying to find some of the coolest new work that I could see in regards to AI and design. I'll say that unfortunately, I couldn't see every talk. Oftentimes there were rooms where they were so full, like it was like waiting at an amusement park. You had to wait in line outside the door for seats to open. And this sometimes didn't even happen. But yeah, I actually saw a number of really interesting talks, often from students. So this is cool. These are PhD students thinking about sort of the future of AI, the future of design. Where could these things go? It's not just academics who are there. There are a lot of corporate research labs. For example, Apple was there. They actually had quite an interesting paper on improving user interface generation models from designer feedback. This was actually led by, I believe, a student intern, Jason Wu, and then a number of other people from Apple, basically showing that the standard model of saying like, I like this, I don't like this when things generate UI isn't really enough. And actually it turns out that having a designer, like professional designers, actually give more critical feedback, comments, actually talk about and give their real sort of more, in-depth knowledge, and then providing that feedback to the models actually leads to much better improvement and reinforcement learning of those things. And on the one hand, I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? You actually ask a bunch of professionals to kind of like really critique and comment instead of just good or bad, or I like this one better or I don't. But it was cool to see. And I think one of the cool things about this paper is that this is something they did with, it's like 21 designers, 1,500 design annotations. It sounds like a lot, but actually, like that's totally doable, I think, for
Hmm.
a reasonable sized company. Or over a long enough time, you could start commenting on stuff, collecting this, and then, right, basically tuning your own designer reinforced models that really are taking in your expertise, your style, the way you think, which I thought that was pretty cool. So that was like one paper.
So who would use that? Is it for like individual designers to like make their own style, or is it going to be like is that research that say Anthropic or Figma or Google is going to take for their own models?
Yeah, I could see this in a couple of ways. I mean, I could see this working potentially for an individual, like if you're trying to basically actually if you're using something like Claude Design, and in the same way in which you were developing, say, a skill file, like this is another way of basically saying, hey, generate stuff, and then I'm going to add comments, and you're going to learn from that. I could actually totally imagine something like an Anthropic or a Google, creating this as a feedback mechanism within their new design tools. I could also see it within Figma. Like Figma Make could do this and say, hey, add all your comments. We do that now. Make all your annotations, and then it starts learning the model better. And that actually could lead to much more improved generation and output
Mm-hmm.
than just sort of like the bulk improvement over time. Like we have to wait for the companies to do that.
Actually,
Another,
that's pretty
yeah,
it's interesting that to use the comments that are already there because people are already commenting on these things. Now, how much they're really focused comments or how much they're contextual versus actual design comments is probably a question, but I mean, there's got to be I don't know, millions and millions of comments that have been added to Figma files over the years?
right. And so in theory, right, if you could train on that, I mean, that could be a huge advantage. When Figma Make came out, it was its own step change to generating user interfaces with OpenAI, with anything else, with Google AI Studio. Like a lot of, like, I remember when my students started using it, they were like, oh yeah, I start all of my design work in Figma Make for layout and stuff because it's so much better. It just understands it better. Then I move over to Claude Code. Now it's interesting to see, and I know we're going back to the original story, but it's like interesting to see Anthropic catching up here, right? And potentially,
Mhm.
matching in that way. And so, who knows? For all we know, they're even utilizing methods like this. I mean, this is really cool that Apple has done this research. They've documented it. They've showed it and showed how to do it. And I think that these methods could be really quite useful again for maybe individuals, but potentially for the large companies, or just for your own company, basically to develop your own internal systems to kind of improve stuff so that everything gets generated in a way that it meets your brand, your product.
Mhm.
Yeah, so this is one paper that really stuck out to me, but there's tons of work here. There's people who are applying AI to make it like a teammate. And I talked to some researchers who are doing that and have some ideas on that. There are people who are trying to capture designer knowledge. So very similar to this one, they're using other strategies, but they have like a agent that floats along in your interface. People are trying to figure out what professionals are doing. They're interviewing professionals to basically try to see how they can take what those professionals do and apply it to AI workflows. There's so much going on, and I'll say I am only catching a sliver of it with some of the talks that I saw that I enjoyed, and sort of pulled people off to the side and said, "Hey, can I interview you?" So yeah, for the rest of the episode, basically we've got a rapid fire a set of interviews that I did with a number of different researchers who had work that I thought was relevant to professionals, and they'll talk a little bit about their work, talk about why it's important, and then where they think it's going to go next.
All right. Well, let's go to the videotape then, and we'll be back with Nick's interviews from Kai.
All right, we're recording. Um, all right, I'm here with Kirsten Kwan to talk about how multi-agent systems can be collaborators on our teams. Kirsten, can you tell us about your paper?
Cool. So I have a paper that's presented Kai 26, and this paper has the title Towards AI as Colleagues, with specifically focusing on multi-agent systems improves the ideation process. So we found that currently the most AI systems today are designed to manage tasks and execute it with kind of predefined steps, but it makes them effective for the process coordination, but also limited their ability to engage in this kind of joint collaborative problem-solving cases with humans or contributed on their new ideas. So in this case, we are thinking about how should we transfer from AI as tools to the paradigm of AI as colleagues. So in this case, we are introducing a new system called multi-colleagues, and it is a multi-agent conversational system that shows how the AI agents can act as like real colleagues in the workspace settings by conversing with each other and also sharing their ideas from different perspectives and actively involving the user in the collaborative ideation process. So to do this, we have our study design in a within subject study with 20 designer participants. And we compared our multi-colleague system to a single agent baseline. In this case, we're testing with ChatGPT baseline. And we found that the multi-colleagues are fostering like a stronger perceived social presence, and also the participants have like a higher perceived outcomes on their ideation outcomes in quality and novelty. And they also think they have more elaborations during the ideations. And we think these findings are demonstrating the potential of the AI agents to move beyond the partners, the process partners to be more specifically, towards the colleagues that can share the intent and also strengthen this kind of group dynamics and also collaborate with the humans to togetherly advance their ideas. That's the brief thing we have from our paper. And I think that's pretty much what we found. And I think this is like a comprehensive summary of what our work.
Great. There's a lot of really neat design skills that are being put out on the web today that sort of mimic what designers and various members of our teams do. I'm curious, given what you've done with your work, what would you say to professional designers about how it might be applied?
Yeah, actually, we do have new findings on the design implications that we think it should be necessary to promote and to spread out when we are treating the AI as the collaborative colleagues. So previously, so to be more specific, we are having there's 3 design implication groups, and we break down into comprehensive perspectives and seamless collaborations, and also the stable and reliable use. So under the first group, the comprehensive perspectives, we are calling for proactive AI collaborators for the broader perspective. So in our case, previously we are having AI as tools where AI is waiting for explicit prompts and they're delivering this kind of single perspectives or the homogeneous answers. But now we are thinking if AI can be as colleagues or collaborators, then AI can anticipate their latent needs and then initiate its own debates and sustain its memory. And also we want to integrate diverse perspectives to a broader discussion. And then the second design implication we have under this comprehensive perspective is we want to change from job titles to the expert roles. So for AI as tools, currently the occupations are based on the role play that constrains agents to narrow their professional boundaries, but we want the colleagues to, in the later stage, to encode the expertise and their decision rights to better support the stage to appropriate this kind of teaming collaborations. And for the second group, the seamless collaboration, we also have 2 design implications. The first is the thread tracking and the adaptive turn-taking. So at the AIS tool stage, there's this kind of uncoordinated multi-agent that replies the fragmented dialogue and also the thread focus. So we want for AIS colleagues, the system should provide this kind of adaptive turn-taking method and also the lightweight thread tracking to balance the diversity and the order. And the second implication we want to call for is adaptive conversational style and responsiveness. So currently the AIS tools are having the response that's be like uniform, mechanical, or often verbose and formal. So for AIS colleagues, we want the colleagues to adopt the adaptive tone and style, and also they can also adjust their verbosity to mirror this like natural team conversation. So for the final group, we want to have the stable and reliable use, specifically the participants calling for grounding colleagues with verifiable traces, because the AIS tools are now contributions with lack provenance and suggestions feel too much more general. So we want the AI colleagues to pair the recommendations, their suggestions, discussions with concise justifications, their citations, and this kind of traceable capability statements. So that's the whole 5 things we have, and we want to more designers to know and to embed when they're designing for future AI systems.
Awesome. And then maybe real quickly, where do you think you want to take this work next?
Where I want to take this work next? I think, to be actually honest, this is like immediate thought that provoked me to do this work. I originally have different backgrounds in different kinds of support tools, but I actually feel like at this current stage, we want to rethink how we shift the introduction paradigm. So that's like a break point for my whole PhD thesis and my research interest. So I think for later researchers on the similar topic, they should also think more about, so currently my paper is focused more on the conversational settings, and what if we test some other different kind of settings beyond the conversational stage, and also to have this human and multiple agents collaborations to push forward. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for telling me about it, and I hope you have a great rest of your time here in Barcelona.
Yeah, you too, of course. Good to meet you.
All right, now I'm sitting here with Ki-Hoon Sun from KAIST, who has a super cool paper on how to capture designer tacit knowledge.
Right.
Ki-Hoon, tell me a little bit about it.
First, hi, my name is Ki-Yoon, and I'm a fourth-year PhD student at KAIST, and working with Juho Kim. And my paper is like, as Nick said, like I built some system like capturing the professional designers' tacit knowledge that is highly embedded in their workflow. So I built a system like think aloud assistant system. Like, for example, like when the professional designers explain their workflow by explaining their how-to or their rationale of their decisions, then the system consistently check whether the professional explained their rationale well or not, and then ask some clarification question based on that. So my system is trying to capture the professional decisions making process as within more detail, especially on focusing on capturing their rationale of why they made that kind of decisions. And then the system also, explaining their every decision with the rationale is kind of a bit burden. So we designed the system like help to articulate or clarify their rationales behind the decisions by inferring the previous answer decisions or rationale of the professionals. So this kind of process make the professional designers make more easily articulate the thought process or reasoning process based on, and then they can easily document the workflow, entire workflow with the very small decision steps. And my work's end goal is kind of like by capturing these kind of decision steps and then building some personal design agent for them, like acting like the professional designers. And yeah, so that is my current work.
And tell me, how do you think that this could be used by professional designers? I know that you worked a lot with professional designers in this, but where do you think that this can go for them?
Actually, our paper's motivation is start from it is very hard to capture the very seniors or professional designers, how they working or how to make some very crucial design decisions in their workflow. So our paper's motivation is start from what if we can capture that kind of decisions and then naturally transferring that kind of decision from the professionals level to the novice level to easily transfer their knowledge. And then why don't we save or make some storage of their professional knowledge by I think that kind of the storage could be knowledge storage could be easily can be variously useful for some educational purpose or for the professionals, from the professional side, they can easily reflect their own workflow based on that captured decisions. So I think there should be some various implications for how to use that. So this kind of all of the motivation could be our paper's work motivation too.
And then can you tell me a little bit about where are you going forward with this work?
Oh, actually, my PhD work is start from what if I have my clone agent that is working like me, including knowing all of the tacit knowledge. then I think I can like fully delegate or I can trust the agent with because they have my knowledge. What if we can have that kind of agent, then our workflow could be like totally changed. So I envision that kind of futures, and so my next step is like capturing this kind the humans like decision steps, and then my next step is like building the very personalized or very very personalized agent that support my workflow within my by collaborating with me directly. So that kind of work could be my next step as a
Cool, awesome. Well, I'm excited for when I can have my own personal AI agent that sort of understands how I work as a designer and can then support me in the rest of the work that I do.
So I envision the future like agent could be a basic format of some human's knowledge, and then I envision the future like that kind of agent could interact with them or with multiple humans, like transferring knowledge or exchanging knowledge. So I envision the future like that based on my work. Thesis work, like all of my thesis work.
Great, excellent. Well, thanks very much, and I hope you have a great rest of your time here at Kai.
Oh yeah, thank you.
All right, now I'm with Jared Govers, who I just saw his talk. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so what we're interested in is the different modalities of presenting information with LLMs. So when you ask a ChatGPT, you might get a single response, or you might get like multiple responses that you can pick from. So what we did in our study is we basically did a structured observation by basically doing an analysis of different variants of chatbot prototypes, ranging from your basic, here's a single answer, to chatbots debating with each other, or having multiple responses that a user can look at and a critic AI can kind of summarize. And we wanted to look at both what are people's mental models, so how do they perceive it, as well as which one enhances the most trust in terms of chatbot information.
Yeah, one of the things that I thought was super interesting was you made a comment that multi-agent systems or systems that are trying to are treated as more trustworthy, but there is no inherent reason why they would be more trustworthy.
Yeah, so like the interesting thing is like what we're looking here is the presentation of information. We're not guaranteeing that having 5 chatbots is going to be more correct than just having one. So really it's about trust calibration, which depends on the type of task you're doing, because sometimes you might want to have more trust, sometimes less. So in our study, we looked at simple questions where it's like, did Paris have the Olympics more than Tokyo? People generally like to have just single answer, easy responses. But for more logical reasoning, your kind of law LSAT tests, people like more kind of context and information in their responses.
And so what do you think that this means for professional designers who are creating these types of systems?
It's obviously there's a lot of research, especially in like FACT and Kai, about more transparency, but what we find is that there's a Goldilocks zone. You don't want to give too much information because that can breed in doubt and people don't particularly like having too much information. But also the current approach of just having a single response or even a chain of thought reasoning isn't currently enough. So it's good to have a middle ground where chatbots or LLMs kind of debate and give different logic rather than just a single chain of thought.
Awesome. Where do you want to take this stuff next?
I think there's a lot of different elements. This is actually my colleague's paper, Soumya Parikh. I'm just the co-author. I'm Jared Govers from University of Melbourne. But I think there's a lot of opportunities for both subjective information. So sometimes you might ask an answer for one single answer, so a math question. But if, for instance, if you're trying to get information about political parties, do you really want a chatbot just to give you one answer, or potentially 5 chatbots representing different political parties to give you a separate party each? So I think there's options for political information, but also potentially for other subjective sources, such as if you're creative writing, you might want to have different potential pathways of answers. And I think having this multi-agentic approach to LLMs gives a lot of options for both information, but also trust calibration.
Awesome. I think this is really opening up some cool opportunities for people to think about how they're going to actually design systems that give information in ways that, you know, if it should be an individual, should it be these multi-agent systems? Because a lot of people are starting to do the multi-agent system thing, but I'm not sure. Again, we don't have any good design patterns here, so I think this work is really cool and kind of fundamental for that. So, Jared, thanks so much for talking to me.
Thanks, yeah.
Yeah, have a great rest of your Kai, and enjoy the rest of your trip in Barcelona.
All right, I'm now sitting down with Max Kraminski. He's going to tell us a little bit about the work that they've been doing here. I participated in a workshop on creative activity traces, which was super cool. Max, tell us what you're interested here at Kai.
Totally, yeah. So I'm working broadly on creative activity tracing, which is to say looking at the temporal data that comes out of people's interactions with design tools, things like Photoshop, things where they're doing kind of co-creative play or co-creative drawing, co-creative writing, like all these kinds of contexts where you're sitting down and kind of composing an artifact, whether that's like a poem or a song or whatever, and we can kind of look at what's happening in that interaction and try to piece together from the trace data, that is whatever they're sort of like capturing from the tool or like observing from the user's behavior or whatever, the structure of that interaction, sort of the interaction dynamics that are emerging between the user and the system. And maybe you can look at things and see like patterns of convergence and divergence as they explore different ideas and then narrow down to more specific ones. Maybe you can see in a human-AI interaction, the tool is maybe dominating the interaction or like sort of taking it over. Maybe the human is more able to steer, more able to control it. And there's various kinds of analysis techniques that we're looking at and sort of introducing to make sense of this trace data.
And so tell me, what do you think is interesting here for professional designers?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things that are going to be possible now, especially given that tools are very easily able to capture this trace data if they're computational or software tools. One thing is that we can kind of reflect this data back to you as visualizations, and you can kind of look back and sort of like see the history of your own design ideation, maybe revisit past versions of artifacts that you've made, almost use it as kind of like a version control mechanism, and sample little bits and pieces of your past creative process to kind of remix the ideas that you might have tried out earlier, not fully been able to make work, but then can sort of revisit or reincorporate later on in the process. Another thing that's kind of neat is that as tool designers or tool implementers, we can start to use these traces to make sense of what we call designer personas or designer archetypes, who maybe have different styles of interaction with the tool, maybe would prefer for certain interactions to be brought more to the forefront or maybe dismissed to the side. Maybe we see people who are in a more exploratory mode, getting different affordances or different user input sort of like mechanisms than people who are trying to like refine down to a more specific, like concrete, finished, polished thing. And in general, this trace data enables us to kind of make sense of how people are collaborating together in these new interesting ways as well, where maybe exposing traces of a design session or a design process enables people to learn from how one another work. Maybe you can sort of see whether your collaborator is using AI in certain ways. Maybe you're able to, in the classroom, if you're an educator, kind of showcase the process or evaluate your students' processes that are being captured in these sort of trace representations.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm super interested in, relates a little bit to my work is sort of reflective practice and the ability to utilize traces for that. I mean, that's something that I'm probably going to take, from some of the things we talked about in the workshop into my own research. I'm curious, where do you want to go with these things next?
Yeah, totally. So we're doing a lot of work right now on reflection being sort of like, made a first-class focus of the user interface. We built this cool graphic design tool where you can basically generate a bunch of images and take out just the little bits and pieces that are the good ones out of the images that are mostly kind of like low quality or not great for various reasons, but that occasionally have like a good little figure or character in them that you like. Or maybe like a sort of color scheme or these other sort of, we call them trinkets basically, reusable design elements that you might want to revisit later. And by sort of recombining these trinkets and making the basic interaction of working with this tool be a process of recombining these trinkets in a way that we are sort of capturing where each one comes from, showing you the lineage or the provenance of each one, and making it easy for you to sort of revisit the ones that you've created in the past by putting them in like a trinket drawer, where you can kind of like search through semantically to see which pieces or bits are relevant to the current exploration. We're hoping that you can make design processes feel a little bit less leaky in the sense of like losing design knowledge. As you kind of progress forward, the canvas that you're working on becomes kind of a representation of where you've been in the past and kind of the most important or interesting design information that came out of each site exploration, so that you can then think in terms of these high-level concepts that you're extracting from the design process as you sort of refine your understanding of what it is you're trying to make. I think this is very broadly applicable. You can do this in writing too. There's other kinds of domains where this might be relevant. So I think in general, design processes that kind of reflect back to the user as sort of an organic, emergent feature of the interaction model is like one possible consequence of this work.
Awesome. Where can people find more if they want to learn?
Yeah, so I'm Max Kraminski. My website is mkremins, mkremins.github.io. You can also just search me on Google and I'll probably show up.
Awesome. Thanks very much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your trip here in Barcelona. All right, I'm sitting here with Ray LC of University of Hong Kong. Ray, tell me about some of your newest work that you're showing here in Barcelona.
Wow, super excited. What we're doing right now is to think about how to support people who are writing stories. So usually people do make stories not usually by really writing it down. That's kind of like the final process. What they actually do is they create the story. Like in their minds, they're forming an image, and this image gets shifted, and in your dreams, these different images come together and come out. So we leverage that idea and use generative AI to support this process to let storytellers have an alternative way of making stories instead of writing stories. So what we did is we created a tool along with a collaboration with Dr. Toby Lee at Notre Dame. What we did is actually use the fact that the images that we create with generative AI, we can now let the user manipulate them, almost like Photoshop. So for example, you can lasso something, change its color, you can fragment stuff, you can collage things together, you can filter things out. And then when you finish with doing that, it automatically makes that story. So in other words, it turns the image into text, which is I think, a very missing part of the generative AI use. We're always doing, text image, right? So now it's image to text, and the story that you come out from the image to text, of course, you can still continue to edit and refine over time. And that becomes an iterative process. We're using both modality, visual modality and the verbal modality in an iterative way to actually use multiple parts of your brain to create these stories.
Okay, that sounds super cool, especially from a design perspective. We've talked on the show before about all kinds of tools that let you edit images in a more focused manner, like you're saying. But I think in design, so much we think in visuals. We don't think in text. And so this sounds like a much more natural interaction. Now, I know you said it's for storytelling. I'm curious, do you have thoughts about how this could apply for professional design work?
Yeah, I think, so this was for stories, but of course, when we're doing design, we're making scenarios. We're telling about what the user needs to do, what the user needs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this tool has a potential for basically using these kind of multi-domain, multi-dimensionality area to help, designers work with whatever the craft happens to be, like making movies, making designs for websites, telling stories in that domain as well.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I'm thinking of here is the user story, right, or a user journey. And right now, I feel like actually we've gone in this opposite direction where we're having AI try to help us do this, and we get a markdown file. I'm creating, whereas before, I was creating these journeys on Figma, I'm doing it in a visual manner, but actually the idea of almost seeing it form as a storyboard, which many people do work that way. I actually quite like working that way. I'm imagining actually using your system to create these user journey storyboards and to iterate on that and build on that. And that feels like a way nicer way of doing that, and something that is just much more in the way that I work as a designer than cool, I've got a markdown file with a bullet list of here is the user journey. So where are you going next with this? Where do you think that this work could go? What do you want to do?
Well, first of all, I think, to address that, so this system, I think it's kind of similar to your work in some sense, is actually going beyond what designers might be used to, right? Like, for example, you're writing story, you're not used to manipulating a Photoshop image, right? That's something real designers do, right? So in some sense, it's kind of like when we're talking about our related work, is that it's actually asking people to try something they're not used to. Mm-hmm. In this case, story writers, but potentially designers as well. But in doing what they're not used to, they're actually doing something more human. So I think that's the general trajectory of what I do here at Studio for Narrative Spaces at City University of Hong Kong, is that we challenge people. We always make systems, and you probably know of us, creating these, designing these interactions for dancers and dancing with robots. You're like, what the heck? Why are they dancing with drones? But I think for all this, for the future, is the idea of we want to challenge people to do what they're not used to, but actually in challenging them to do what they're not used to, it's actually we're trying to do the more human thing. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, I could use Photoshop to change my text, in some sense, right? To retell my scenario as a designer. So that's kind of the general topic that we want to keep iterating in the future. Maybe doing a little bit more on, for example, film, because we're in the creative media. A lot of people make movies. But also to explore things like multiple people, social influences in a group, how that can facilitate or hinder these type of creative processes.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. Love hearing about the work and love to see where you go forward with it.
Appreciate it, lots of fun.
So now I'm here with Yujin. I just saw her talk, which was super cool because she interviewed a bunch of fashion designers, and I think her work could have some really interesting implications for how we think about AI and design. Tell us about it.
Thank you, Nick. My name is Eugene. I'm from Busan National Institute of Science and Technology. I'm a PhD design candidate. Actually, about my paper, the title is Creativity from Surprise, Bridging the Gap Between Fashion Designers' Inspiration Work and AI Creative Support Tools. In this work, we had done an interview with 20 fashion professional designers. They have a lot of work experience, honestly. Like the minimum is 3 years working experience and maximum could be more than 10. And actually, 8 of them from really big global companies such as the North Face, Timberlands, and then even one from Adidas. So we do got a really valuable data from the fashion designers. That's enough. Is that enough? How about the insights from the workshop? Okay. So then I will talk a little bit about the insights from the interview we did. We found there like a really big difference between the novice designer and the expert designers. So the novice designer is more kind of willing to accept AI's inspirations, inspirations. But the experienced designers, they are more selective and they are more cautious, carefully to refine the output from AI generations. And I think that's kind of reasonable because they have gained a lot of design knowledge and skills based on their working experience, and they kind of know what kind of inspirations are more suitable for the market, and they will add their own expertise inside the design process to make it better. But however, the novice designer, they are very new and they are willing to embrace new ideas as quick as they can. So they are kind of more rushed to accept the ideas from the AI. So I will really encourage novice designer could kind of train themselves to be more well prepared for AI. Before they well prepare for the AI, you should train their own knowledge, fashion knowledge. That's my topic. That's pretty much it about it.
Yeah, so one of the things in your paper that I really liked was this idea of surprise, and you actually talked about different kinds of surprise.
Oh, yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, because I think that this is something that designers are maybe wanting from the AI, is like, I want to be surprised, but we're not always surprised. Tell us about your kind of way of breaking down surprise and its utility for designers.
Okay, thank you. So the surprise, actually, this is the foundation. That's the very starting point of my paper. So we found the surprise could trigger some inspiration from the design process, and that happened at the very early of the design process, usually the concept development process. And then we try to define the surprise by ourselves. And at the very beginning, we define the surprise from the literature work, the other papers, other research, and we define the surprise as like difference between user input and output. But this is very general, and we want to know how the fashion designer is thinking about surprise. And then we brought this definition into our interview, and we asked the fashion designer, what do you think about surprise? And or do you have any interesting moment you never think about it when you're using AI? And after you receive this kind of emotion or some of the visual resources, like to let you feel surprised, how can you to transfer them into the real design concept? So we try to kind of inspire them by asking them more questions. And then we found it very interesting, like the expert, professional fashion designers, again, they are very careful about the surprise, and they will try to match this surprise within their like the brand identity, the brand they are working for, and using their own like professional knowledge to pull this kind of random surprise into a controllable strategy, design things. For example, they will use some like combination between materials and like collage. For example, if they found some architecture really surprise them, and then they will do some strategy. One of the participants highlight that it kind of simplifies the line of that architecture. So apply the edge of the architecture lines and then just keep the surprise information, but make it very simple. And then apply these kind of light sketch upon the design. So I believe they are kind of they're more strategical to apply surprise in fashion design process. So yeah, very interesting, I believe, this topic about surprise. So I really love it, and I try to make it into a paper as a research.
Great. And so where do you want to take this work next?
We are trying to develop a system because we found not all of the fashion designers are, this kind of surprise is not easy to catch or not easy to be transferred into the design. So we try to design some like system tools to help them find a surprise from AI generated images and then apply them into the design process. We do have some challenges. So we want to know, of course we know like fashion designers, they use our like professional knowledge to transfer, but what kind of professional knowledges or what kind of strategies they can use. We have some rough ideas, but we probably need to do some more depth interview to like point out these kind of strategies and apply them into the system design.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great time here in the rest of your trip in Barcelona.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed those interviews from Barcelona, and we'll be back next week with more AI and design news. We'll see you then.